Okay, now start the broadcast and then click on start recording. Okay?
But first, before you start the broadcast, I want to tell you, Val, you have to change it to me between every single panelist because I'm going to introduce them all. That's all. Thank you.
And this is Fran. So
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. We are going to just wait for another minute, but thank you all for attending today's webinar. And thank you for your patience. I think we're going to get started now. Still waiting for a few more attendees, but thank you for attending today's webinar, Accessible Access, Bringing Together the Disability and Asset Building Communities, hosted by the Asset Coalition Toolkit for States, National Disability Institute, World Institute on Disability, and the Sargent Shriver National Center on Poverty Law. My name is Hannah Weinberger-Divac, and I am an Asset Building Specialist at the Shriver Center. I will be moderating the webinar today. First, a few housekeeping matters. If at any point during the webinar you are having technical difficulties, please call or email Linda Jordan at 312-368-5231 or lindajordan@povertylaw.org. All attendees will be automatically muted. However, attendees will be able to ask questions using the control panel. We will forward questions to the presenter as we receive them, and the presenter may choose to answer questions during or at the close of her presentation. We would like this webinar to be interactive, and all the presenters welcome your questions. If you would like to access our closed captioning, go to www.captiontext.com, confirmation number 1447686. And with that, let me introduce you to our presenters today. Fran Curley is the Director of New Initiatives at Allies, Inc. Thomas Foley is the Acting Executive Director of the World Institute on Disability. Shawn Fremstad is the Director of the Inclusive and Sustainable Economy Initiative at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Johnette Hartnett is the Director of Research and the Real Economic Impact Tour for the National Disability Institute and co-principal investigator with the Burton Blatt Institute, Syracuse University College of Law. Margaret Lom is an assistant professor at the Boston College Graduate School of Social Work. Megan O'Neill is an asset building consultant and PhD student at the School of Community Economic Development of Southern New Hampshire University. Before we launch into their presentations, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the field of asset building. Asset building aims for households to acquire the financial resources to get ahead in life, not just get by. To explain asset building, it helps to define it in the negative, asset poverty. Most people have heard of income poverty, which focuses on a household's current income level. Asset poverty, on the other hand, focuses on a family's total household wealth. A household is considered asset poor if it does not have enough assets to meet its expenses, for 3 months if all outside sources of income have disappeared. More than 1 out of every 5 U.S. households, 22% according to CFED, and approximately 1 in 4 women-headed households are asset poor. And asset inequality is even more pronounced by race. 37% of non-white households are asset poor in the U.S. Building towards asset ownership ensures that there are adequate financial reserves to weather a financial crisis, build economic stability, and shield a household from poverty. Our first presenter is Shawn Fremstad. Shawn is the director of the Inclusive and Sustainable Economy Initiative at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. He's the author of Half in 10, Why Taking Disability into Account is Essential to Reducing Income Poverty and Expanding Economic Inclusion.
Hi everyone, this is Shawn. Hi everyone, this is Shawn Fremstad. I'm happy to be joining you today, and thank you, Hannah, for that introduction. I'm going to kick off this webinar with what is really background information on the relationship between disability and income poverty, and then more broadly economic inclusion. So most of what I'm going to be talking about is income poverty, but I think it's still very relevant to the topic of asset poverty. And my basic message here really is that taking disability into account is really an essential part of any local, state, or federal effort to reduce income poverty, asset poverty, and to really expand economic inclusion. Now, I think particularly for those of you with a disability or working on disability issues or being a disability service provider, this may sound like a rather obvious point, that there's a relationship and an important relationship between poverty and disability, but I think it's really important to emphasize because disability as an issue and poverty as an issue have often developed on separate tracks here in the United States. So typically you'll see in newspaper stories, articles, policy reports, when they talk about the demographics of poverty, you'll see a lot of statistics by gender, by race, poverty by ethnicity, age, marital status, but you'll almost never see those statistics by disability status. And again, I think it's kind of this way that disability and poverty have kind of developed as sort of siloed issues, and there's not as much a crossover often on the policies as need to be. And so I think here there's this point that the great economist Amartya Sen makes in this slide, that the relevance of disability in the understanding of deprivation of the world is often underestimated. This is certainly true when you think about international development issues, which is what Amartya Sen is referring to here, but it's also definitely the case in the United States, where I think we really haven't taken full account of the relationship between disability and poverty. So to give you a sense of that relevance, I'm going to review some important new research showing the share of people living below the poverty line who have a disability. But before that, let me also briefly discuss how disability is increasingly being defined and some of the changes in the definition of disability that have taken place over the last couple of decades. So I think you can think about this. There's sort of an old school understanding of disability and what I guess I'll call a new school understanding. And the old school is perhaps something like the definition of disability used by Social Security or in the SSI program. Basically, the idea is that disability is a sort of permanent incapacitating condition. It makes any work pretty much impossible. And sort of beyond that, that it's a problem really inherent in the person with a disability rather than something that has a larger context. And what I'm thinking of here is more of the new school, the more modern consensus definition, looks at things very differently. It sees disability not as something that's inherent to the person, but more as the product of the interaction between various health conditions, impairments, but also environmental and contextual factors. So a disability, the meaning of a disability may depend, for instance, on the structure of the workplace, the structure of a program, and that's it's kind of the interaction between the person's condition and the context they find themselves in that really matter. And so on this slide we've got I think one of the better sort of restatements of more of this modern consensus definition. This is from the World Health Organization. It was the product of much international discussion and debate with input from disability activists, people with disabilities, but also from the medical community. And it basically defines disability in this way as the interaction between environmental and contextual factors and then various health conditions, many of which are experienced by the broad population. And if you look at the sort of Venn diagram type thing with the various circles, it looks specific. It basically outlines 3 specific kinds of health conditions: impairments, participation restrictions, and activity limitations. And part of the takeaway point there is that you can have impairments without, say, a participation restriction. For instance, a health impairment that doesn't impair the ability to work. In some cases, those can be independent, but often they relate to one another. And again, it's often depending on various environmental factors. And so you see this kind of definition also, particularly here in the United States, in something like the Americans with Disability Act, where you have the idea of a reasonable accommodation, again, getting at the notion that it's not simply a problem with the person, that the problem may be the lack of accommodations offered to a person to make a particular program or make the workplace really work for them in light of that particular impairment or limitation that they have. So let's turn now, we'll talk a bit about just some background statistics and data on disability. And first of all, I'm going to talk about just the prevalence. Using this kind of broader definition, you can see, and this is a chart from the Census Bureau, that about 1 in 5 Americans, nearly 20%, have a disability. So it's not a sort of rare thing. It's a fairly significant portion of the population experiencing a disability during a typical year. And then if you look specifically among working age people with a disability, you see, first of all, that disability increases with age. Most people aren't born with disabilities. It's something that comes about through a life cycle, although there are many children who do have disabilities. And you also see the impact here that disability has on work. So one of the things, and it's the circle to the right, showing just the differences in employment, again, in an annual kind of over the year, where employment basically drops for people with disability, and also as the severity of the disability increases. Moving to the next chart, this is looking at the employment issue also, but on a more current, and here it's actually a monthly basis. And this is actually very interesting. Within really only the last few months, the federal government has started reporting monthly unemployment rate data by disability status. So unemployment was another one of these areas where you had a lot of good data by ethnicity, by gender, by age, but you didn't have it until very recently by disability. And it's something that disability advocates have been pushing for a long time, and the current administration finally started putting out that data. And the basic story here is, again, much lower levels of participation in the labor force, about 1/3 the level for people with disability, and much higher, almost twice the rate of unemployment for people with disability compared to people without. Now, I mean, unemployment's high for both categories right now, but still you can kind of think about this as it's high for people without disabilities. It's roughly twice as high for those without. So what do these kind of unemployment numbers, lower levels of participation in the labor force mean in terms of income, and particularly in terms of income poverty? And this chart, which is looking specifically at working age people with income below the poverty line by disability status, I think tells, I think, a very extraordinary story. I mean, basically, and this is from just published research, and shows you that among those working age adults with income below the poverty line in a year, the year here is 1997, but this is pretty much, if you use very much newer data, you get the same numbers. You see that about 53% have no disability, but almost as many, 47%, have one or more disabilities. So just looking at this, you see that disability is a more common sort of demographic characteristic, say, than single parenthood or some other demographic characteristics that are often typically associated with poverty in the literature. And then if we move to the next chart, this is basically the same idea, but looking at long-term poverty. So poverty where people are living below the income poverty line for more than 36 months over a 4-year period, and what the disability status, and here you have even kind of starker numbers where almost 2/3 of those people in longer-term kind of consistent poverty have a disability, as opposed to about 1/3 without a disability. And then finally, I'll just note, income, of course, by itself is important. I think it tells us something about economic hardship, economic insecurity, but it's also important because it means that people are more likely to experience very concrete forms of hardship, like not being able to pay the rent or mortgage, going without getting medical care, food insecurity, and hunger. And if you look at kind of this is a pretty dense chart, but I give it to you so you can not necessarily figure it all out on the webinar, but so you have it to refer back to. It's basically looking at the relationship between hardship and disability for low-income adults. And the basic story is that the combination of disability and low income produces very high rates of hardship. If you look at people living below the poverty line, working age people, again, below the poverty line during the year, about 70% of them experience one of these hardships, and you have fairly high levels of multiple hardships also. But actually, the combination of the disability with low levels of income produces even higher rates of hardship than if you look at low income alone. So for instance, if you look at the hardship rates in terms of hunger or in terms of not being able to pay the rent, for people with disabilities with incomes between 100 and 200% of poverty, those hardship rates are actually higher than they are for people without a disability but living below the poverty line. So in some ways, I think this shows you how misleading the poverty line can be. And I think it also suggests that there's other factors, including things like assets, that are playing in here and that are lessening hardship, perhaps, for people without disability, but the lack of them are contributing for people with disability. So with that, I'll close and pass it on to next, back to Hannah, I guess.
Thank you, Shawn. Up next is Tom Foley. Tom is the Acting Executive Director of the World Institute on Disability. Tom's professional experience includes more than 20 years as an advocate in the independent living movement, focusing on employment, disaster relief, emergency preparedness, benefits navigation, and wealth planning for people with disabilities. During his tenure, Tom developed and influenced federal and state legislation to encourage employment and increase participation of people with disabilities in asset-building programs.
Great, thanks, Hannah, and I want to thank Sargent Shriver for the opportunity to participate today. The first thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is just, as Shawn pointed out so well, when we talk about poverty in the United States, we're talking more often than not about people with disabilities. Folks with disabilities, as Shawn pointed out, are significantly overrepresented in the poverty roll. So really, when we're talking about asset building, a large part of that audience is disability. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about specifically today is taking sort of a long-term financial planning approach that utilizes both tools from the asset building and the disability community to really change the economic expectation for people with disabilities. I'm a big fan of examples, so I just want to run through some of the work that we've been doing here that we've found to be pretty successful. And if we go to my first slide, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Frank. And Frank has a disability, and he works part-time. And as you can see by the slide, he also receives benefits. For this example, we're going to say that Frank receives about $900 a month in SSI benefits, supplemental Social Security income, and he earns in his part-time job about $585 a month. This is going to get a little bit technical, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. So, you know, the way SSI works is they have an earned income calculation, and so Frank is earning $585 a month. And that first $85 SSI kind of doesn't count as income. Someone on SSI is allowed to make $85 before it will affect their SSI check. But that remaining $500 is counted as earned income, and for every dollar earned, Frank's SSI check will be cut by 50 cents. So in this example, he's after the $85, his $500 income will reduce his check by $250, and so the SSI check becomes $650, and Frank also will receive his $585. So at the end of the day, Frank is making $1,235 a month, and you know, this shows that going to work for people with disabilities pays, and lots of people with disabilities are working and have earned income. And so that's that example. So but before we go to the next slide, I want to talk about a couple of the tools that we utilize when we talk about long-term financial planning, sort of layering and leveraging different tools. And the first one is the individual development account that I'm assuming most people are familiar with. An IDA is a matched savings account. For every dollar a participant puts into it, it can be matched 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. And the IDA I want to talk about specifically today is a federally funded IDA. And the reason I want to talk about that is a federally funded IDA provides an income and an asset disregard for people with disabilities. So in this earned income calculation, for every dollar that Frank would put into a federally funded IDA, he will not receive the offset to his SSI check. So that's a powerful income generator for folks with disabilities, and it's also a powerful asset building tool for people with disabilities. And the other tool I want to talk about is a plan to achieve self-support, or a PASS plan. Again, it's a sort of a special program, a special savings account. This time, not an asset building tool, but a tool that came out of the disability community and the Social Security Administration. And for every dollar of earned income that is put into a PASS, again, there is no offset to Frank's SSI check. In a PASS program, you can accumulate funds to go back to school or to get training for a job or tools you might need for a job. So anything employment-related or education-related, something that's going to help you get back to work and get to the workforce. So those are two tools that we really like to talk about and we really like to use when we're talking about long-term financial planning strategies for people with disabilities. If we go to the next slide, we can maximize income and savings at the same time by utilizing these two tools. So, you know, with a little bit of advanced planning, you know, Frank, same situation, making $900 a month from SSI and $585 a month from his work. Let's see what happens if Frank puts $100 a month into an IDA. And I'm going to have him put it into a home purchase IDA because we're big fans of home purchases here. And with you know, the CFED scorecard recently came out, and even after the big housing bubble and the economic turndown, over 40% of U.S. household wealth is still held in real estate. And, you know, particularly now seems like a particularly good time for people to get involved in purchasing real estate. So we're big fans of home purchase IDAs. And we're also going to have Frank put $300 a month into his PASS plan. because Frank has an idea of starting a small business, or maybe he wants to take a couple of classes to go back to school or finish a degree or something that will help his earning potential down the line. And also, there are income-related work expenses that can be deducted from the SSI earned income calculation. And we're going to say that Frank has, about $100 a month in those expenses as well. So if we look at this slide, basically what we've done is, through a little bit of advanced planning, we've started to save for a home. We've started to save to start a small business, or to go back to school, or to get some tools that might make Frank's future employment more reasonable. And we've also increased Frank's income because the money going into the IDA is not counted as income for purposes of SSI. The money going into the PATH is not counted as income for purposes of SSI. So at the end of the day, instead of bringing home the $1,235, Frank is bringing home $1,485 a month and saving. If we go to the next slide, let's see what we have after a year. So Frank has been earning an additional, $250 a month and saving. In his PATH plan at the end of the year, we're going to be looking at about $3,600. We're using a 3-to-1 IDA match here. These are all for explanatory reasons, really. The $100 a month will become $400 a month, and over the period of a year, we're looking at about $4,800. And then we're gonna put about $85 a month into a retirement account, because we know that saving for the future is important. And I come from a financial planning background, and I'm always bothering people about saving for retirement. And so we have about $1,000 at the end of the year in a retirement plan as well. And again, this is all from having a little bit of information and making the step to plan for your future financially. If we go to the next slide, let's take a look at what your savings can do for you. So, I mentioned that I'm a big fan of long-term financial planning. And, if that $1,000 a month, it was $85 a month that we talked about that Frank puts away every month, comes out to about $1,000 a year. If someone puts away $1,000 a month over a 40-year period at only 8% interest, at the end of that period of time, we're looking at a nest egg of $325,000. And in this example, I'm a little off topic, but in this example, we're going to assume that Frank is participating in one of the Medicaid buy-in programs that allows people with disabilities on benefits to save for retirement. But this is a number actually that I stole from Brookings Institute, and their annual interest rate was actually higher. So this is a pretty realistic number. And really all of this is having access to the information, choosing to make a decision, and then the rest of it is just math. But this is one of the things that we like to talk about when we talk about really changing the economic expectation for people with disabilities. You don't have to save a lot of money every month, but over the long haul, a little bit of savings every month can make a really big difference. Einstein said that the compound interest is the greatest force in the universe. And I think turning $85 a month into $325,000 over the long haul really illustrates that point. And that's one of our long-term leveraged returns that we like to talk about. If we go to the next slide, here's what your IDA can do for you. And again, this is a very high-level overview of some of the work that we've been doing. But at the end of the year, we have $4,800, which is not a lot of money. But if we're looking at a home purchase, say a $200,000 home purchase, I'm here in California in the Bay Area, and even here there are lots of condominiums and homes after the economic turndown that people can acquire for as little as $200,000. Excuse me. A lot of those programs also come along with first-time buyer programs that assist in down payment assistance. $50,000 in some parts of the Bay Area. In San Francisco, it's up to $100,000. California has a 4% 30-year fixed-rate mortgage for people with disabilities, which also helps make home purchases more affordable. And in some situations, people on receiving Section 8 vouchers can use those vouchers to pay a mortgage. So there's lots of flexibility out there for folks with disabilities to become homeowners. So in this case, we have, $4,800, in a lot of situations will be enough for an individual to make a down payment and get into their first home, especially if they leverage it against some of the other programs I just mentioned. Over a 30-year mortgage, if we use a very conservative number of 3% appreciation, we're looking at a long-term leveraged return of the home being worth $492,000. If we go to the next slide, let's put it all together. So, basically what we've done is we've taken a few steps that not only increase income, but also really pay attention to the long-term leveraged financial return. And we've got $492,000 in home value, and at the end of a 30-year mortgage, that would be paid off. We've got $325,000 in savings, in retirement savings, for a grand total of $817,000 at the end of these sort of programs. And really, all we've done is had access to information and really tried to change the expectation for people with disabilities. The World Institute on Disability publishes Equity, which is an online asset building magazine for people interested in disability and asset building. There is the contact information there. And again, my name is Thomas Foley. I'm with the World Institute on Disability, tom@wit.org. And again, thank you to Sargent Shriver for the opportunity.
Thank you, Tom. We had a question for you from one of our participants. So when the retirement fund exceeds $2,000, wouldn't that disqualify Frank from SSI eligibility?
Excellent question. In many states, I believe it's up to 37 states, and it differs from state to state, if you're a person with a disability who is working, you have access to a Medicaid buy-in program which has a carve-out for retirement savings. Again, a lot of this is illustrative of what we're trying to do, but big picture, one of the things after a year or two of savings, maybe Frank has moved on from saving, from earning $585 to, his next job and his next job and his next job. So maybe eventually he's no longer on SSI with that asset limit. Perhaps he's now, off an income benefit but still receiving Medicaid. Or perhaps he's moved on to a higher paying job that includes benefits. But for folks with disabilities there are state options for building assets even if you're on benefits.
Thank you, Tom. And up next is Johnette Hartnett. Dr. Hartnett is the Director of Research and the Real Economic Impact Tour for the National Disability Institute and co-principal investigator with the Burton Blatt Institute, Syracuse University College of Law. Dr. Hartnett is National Director and co-founder of the Real Economic Impact Tour that since 2005 has provided free tax preparation and other asset-building strategies to over 330,000 taxpayers with disabilities, with refunds totaling over $296 million.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here on the call, and I'm just looking here. Let me see. Is my presentation going to come up here? I just lost the screen.
Dr. Hartnett, I can pull up your presentation.
Yes, it didn't go back to my desktop, so I'm asking if you'll do that, please. Thank you. I'm going to start anyway. This is an honor to be here, and I want to thank the Sargent Shriver Center for this wonderful opportunity. But I also want to thank many, many of you that are on the call today because you really represent the work that I'm going to, be speaking about. I'm just looking here on how to move forward on my my PowerPoint here. Okay, it's not moving forward for me.
How about now? Try clicking up.
There we go. There we go. There we go. There we go. And to go back, could you go back on it? That would be great. Thank you. Just to. Okay. Okay. I apologize for this startup here. The National Disability Institute is a national research and development organization that started in 2000 as a program of the National Cooperative Bank, and it began to really look at the issues of asset development and for persons with disabilities. And for many of you on this call, you were part of the work, and we all began this conversation together. And part of the work that we are doing right now with the Real Economic Impact Tour is to really expand on that work. And 4 years ago, NDI went on its own to really expand this work. I'm going to share with you, it looks like there's a little bit different slideshow here than what that we are, let me just move forward here, to share with you some of the work that we're doing in the, around the country. And I'm not doing well with this PowerPoint, so I'm going to talk through it, and maybe you could just listen here. But there's much information on that PowerPoint. We have looked at the area of asset development as a series of strategies that have the potential to help people with disabilities improve their economic status and expand opportunities for community participation and positively impact their quality of life experience. On the national level, there is no accepted definition of what asset development means for people with disabilities in terms of the definition. A lot of people say, well, why is asset development important for persons with disabilities? And certainly we just heard with the presentation on poverty that a major part of our poverty population, and I think the work that we're doing is really informing the poverty debate and looking at taxpayers with disabilities, but also the whole issue of the asset caps for people that need to access public benefits, and what does all that mean? It's important because it's going to provide a greater financial security and independence. It's going to improve people's community participation and improve their overall mental and physical health. And no question, all the research in asset development in the non-disability world says that the people that own assets live longer, are better educated, have better health. We know that to be true. We just haven't done any kind of longitudinal data on asset ownership and people with disabilities. The disability prevalence is very, very just really, it's 54 million Americans, as you heard earlier. 1 out of 5 have a disability. We know that that's well over 100 million when we talk about who's impacted as well, and the prevalence about 11 million with sensory disabilities. Physical is about 25 million. Self-care is about 8 million. Going outside the home is about 12 million, and that was an area that the IRS, in a study that we did, found that 25% of taxpayers said they had difficulty going outside their home. The issue of asset poverty, as we heard at the very beginning, is a critical one. We know that it's 33% of all of Americans have about a zero or negative net assets. We know for persons with disabilities that that is upwards of 80%. And remember, in this work that we're doing with the Real Economic Impact Tour, which began 5 years ago, because we said, hey, we want to be a part of this conversation that's happening around the country. I call it poverty policy, but we were looking at individual development, development accounts that came out of the welfare reform in 1996, and all of the work that's going on. We said we want to be a part of this work. And so we got involved with IRS 5 years ago, and they have their VITA volunteer income tax sites around the country. Many of you on this call are running those sites and doing this work. And we said we just want to make sure that disability is part of the network that you are serving. And it's important because the Earned Income Tax Credit, they say, represents about 25% of an individual total income for a year. So just think of your total income of 20 and what 25% is and what you would do with a check one time a year for that amount. And that's what the tax sites are doing around the country right now, that they are really working to forward the information and to help low-income people and moderate income, because the tax limit the income limit right now for their income tax credit actually is $48,000 or $49,000 for a family of 4. And let me just say quickly what that means for someone who is working single, who's maybe making $10,000 a year, doesn't have a need to file because it's not required. But let's say that they did file and they're eligible, even though they don't have a child. And there's a lot of myths about filing if you're under, you don't need to, but let me tell you, there's a lot of benefits too. And this is not my area, so I'm not going to get into the tax piece a lot, but I just want you to know, for somebody making $10,000 a year, that could be a return of like $150, $200 that's retroactive 3 years. Now we're talking $600. And then let's say your area, your coalition, your city had a match savings program. That's real money on the table. And Social Security, supplemental security income doesn't count that as income or resource if you're doing it through the federal IDA program. We've done quite a bit of research on asset development for people with disabilities. I'm just going to go very, very quickly. The taxpayer research that we have done with IRS found that there's about 5.5 million taxpayers with disabilities, and between 1.3 and 1.6 are not filing, and many are not filing because they don't have a requirement to. We figure that's worth about $1 billion in earned income tax credit that's sitting on the table that's being underutilized. The adjusted gross income we found for taxpayers was $19,000 versus $33,000 for non-disabled taxpayers. We also found that 51% had an adjusted gross income of less than $20,000, and there's our poverty, population right there. We know from our research that 66% use a paid preparer compared to 56% with no disability. And 37%, as you just heard from Tom, are less likely to have savings or investments. And some of our other research that we did in New York City, we did through Ford Foundation grant 5 years ago. We started this work. We studied about 3,000 filers in New York City with disabilities, and 30% had checking account, 12% a savings account, 25% had received the EITC, 57% said they needed accommodations to file a return. So that's where we started. And what's in front of you right now is, and I guess something's starting to work here for me, but this is the results of some of the work that we have been doing over the, you can see the number of cities in the map that you saw, and that this is real money on the table. And I think the most important number on here is the tax refunds received of $12 million, but the $66.4 million saved in paid preparer fees. So this is a real program that's on the ground. It's being run around the country by community-based organizations that are doing tax prep. And the National Community Tax Coalition, which I had on the slide presentation, and I'll make sure you all have this, they do have over 300 coalitions in the country. There's over thousands and thousands of volunteers that are doing free tax prep. They did over 3 million returns last year. We're part of that network, but the REI Tour will be in 100 cities this year. I was able to fund 59 cities last year, and we're really, really excited about this. So it's all about, the work that we're doing is about building new relationships, and our relationships are not with disability organizations. They're with mayor's offices, United Ways, IRS, FDIC, taxpayer assistance services, different state organizations. We have private sector partners, Bank of America, AT&T, Walmart. We have our Court of Therapeutics. So there's all sorts of new partners coming on board. This year, 54 Freedom has just come on, and Tom, you'll be excited to hear this. The 54 Freedom is providing a group policy for people with disabilities, and these are life insurance policies and different policies that have never been available before for people with disabilities, with significant disabilities. So to get involved with the REI Tour, you can go to our website, reitour.org, but the most important thing that we're doing there is developing disability work groups and volunteer tax preparation assistance and participation. We have monthly calls, and we're hosting a mayor's meeting in Jacksonville, Florida this year with 47 cities coming. So it's pretty exciting. And I think I'm going to stop with that other than if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hartnett. We did have a question. Someone asked, how much does one have to earn to file for EITC, and do you have to have children?
No, you can be a single filer, and I think if you're making $2,000 or $3,000 a year, you can file a return. I think $1 a year you can file a return, but again, I'm not the tax expert.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Up next is Curley. Fran is the Director of New Initiatives at Allies, Inc., a New Jersey organization dedicated to helping people with special needs live and work as independently as possible. Fran directs the Success of Savings program, a pioneering financial literacy program that teaches people with special needs how to budget and save their earned income, as well as the IDA program.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Here we go. There, everybody have this PowerPoint up? Okay, great. Thank you for, again, the Sargent Shriver Center for hosting this today. And Allies is very excited to be a part of this presentation. Back in 2004, we started looking at the inability of...
Fran, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
We actually can't see your slides.
You can. Do you have me on there?
Yep. Are you showing your screen?
Yes, I am. What are you seeing?
Nothing, actually. We can run it over here.
Okay, that's fine. Because it's up on my screen. Hold on a second. Wait a second. I think I had to click something. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. I had to click one more button. All right. As I was saying, back in 2004, we were looking at the situation with a lot of the people that we support with disabilities that they weren't able to save. And I think one of the things that you've heard through Shawn and Tom and Johnette speaking is really there had been a lot of disincentives to saving. So we either had people who didn't make enough money to save, or they were afraid to save because they didn't want to lose their benefits. So we looked at our population and developed what we call the Success of Savings program, SOS, to help them get along. And first looking at, as we would with any of us, what are our financial goals, our short-term or medium-term and our long-term goals in our lives. and we wanted to develop a program that would give us the tools to provide the instruction and guidance to the people that we support so they could also realize their dreams. As many of the speakers before talked about Social Security and the assets and asset limits, so I'm going to kind of skip over that part. In 2004, the New Jersey Council on Developmental Disabilities funded a pilot grant for us to start our SOS program. And so we modeled it after the Access for Independence IDA program. So we had escrow accounts that we managed. We had matching funds that came from the DD Council as well as some local bankers that supported us. And what was unique about this program was, as opposed to an IDA program where you're saving for a house, you're saving for school or for a business or something large like this, we were working with people who had never experienced saving at all in their lives. So what was nice about this is our CEO calls it our training wheels savings program, is that individuals could save for whatever they wanted to save for. So some people saved for vacation, some people saved for a computer, some people saved to pay off some debt, some people bought a TV. There was lots of different things. So they had a double incentive. One was that they could save for whatever they wanted, and secondly, they had the matching funds that were being provided. And then along with the programs, in order to get the matching funds and to participate, they had to attend our financial literacy classes. So as we got through that first class, and we had 20 people graduated, and they all saved their funds and got their matching funds and were able to buy their asset of choice. That should say 2005, not 2995. We'll just have to correct that one on the date. Again, we had our banking partners who not only provided us with matching funds to supplement the DD Council funds, but also participated with us as the instructors. So we had the banking community integrally involved in the process as we went along. The following year, we had 40 more people go through that same program, again funded by the DD Council. And then we were granted an IDA through Access for Independence for 10 participants to go into a match savings program to save for home ownership, entrepreneurial, or education. And we actually have 5 of our SOS graduates who are now participating in our IDA program. So it was really a starter step for them to do that. And we're also involved now with another IDA through the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs for 15 more individuals, which not only include people we support, but also our direct care staff who, unfortunately, are also in the low-income brackets that make them eligible for the program, but we thought it would also be a great incentive for our staff to, if we could help them buy their first home or go back to school and continue their education. This past year, we've really focused on extending the program out to other people, so we partnered with the Jewish Family and Children's Services program in Southern New Jersey to mentor them through their first class, and they graduated 11 people through their program. And we also worked with OMRDD in New York to help them develop and write a grant for their own IDA program for people with developmental disabilities in New York State. Developed, as part of this process, we used a lot of different curriculum, and actually on the call today is one of our staff, Diane Tomasetti, who worked very hard with all of our all the curriculum that we use and all the instructors to refine and finalize a curriculum specifically for people with special needs and developmental disabilities, which actually we're finalizing at this point to package along with an administrative manual so that people can replicate this and we can help to mentor other organizations and groups in New Jersey or anywhere across the country to replicate this program to get people started in savings at a smaller scale before they start to save for a house or something larger like that. again, our goals are to reduce the barriers and integrate people and promote asset management with people that we support. It's a match savings program. As I said, the way it was not like the traditional IDAs was because people could save for whatever they did want to save for, and it helped people to understand that they could save and not lose their benefits, because that's the fear of everyone we support and the parents of everyone that we support, that they don't want to lose that. They developed savings plans and budgets through the classes. They learned how to budget. They learned how to make their own deposits. And the other great thing about the coursework that was delivered monthly by people from banks, and so we did it at banks or libraries or office space, was that every month they came together. So it was also a support group for each other. We also incorporated volunteers as wealth coaches to support people during the class, but also to help them in between classes, make sure people made their deposits. So we tried to build in a lot of additional support so that we tell everybody that the title is called Success of Savings, and we really focus on the success. We want people to finish this program feeling successful, feeling that they can save and attain their goals, and really create good habits going forward. Rutgers was involved providing evaluation for us, and we found that we really scored high in the number of people that continue to save through the program and are continuing to save now, which is great. We get calls from people that they're still saving money even though they're not in the program anymore. I'm going to skip over these. They're in the PowerPoint that you can download. These are some of our savers. Robin saved for a trip to Boston, and hope to save for a home someday. Amy saved to go to camp, and she enjoyed learning about banks and how to save money. Jenny saved for a computer, and she also wants to save for a home someday. But as she says here, they're very expensive, so she knows she has to save a while to do that. Andrea was one of our great graduates. She came to us with a lot of debt, and she calls me now. In fact, she's applying now for our IDA program, but she calls me now just to tell me that she still has not gone back to getting debt on her credit card. And every month when she pays her bills, she's happy that she went through the program. So if anyone is interested in going forward and doing a program like this, we would love to support people in doing that. You need to just figure out who you want to serve, find local instructors through banking, determine the best curriculum for you, create good activities that really engage people in the process, complete good intake so people have a really solid foundation for their program. Of course, marketing for the matching funds is a challenge nowadays, but we believe it's a very strong incentive for people to get involved with that. Understanding the escrow and bank accounts so that you manage the funds well and it is protected in those accounts so it does not count towards your assets. The future of our program is we really would like to sustain and grow it, and again, through our curriculum and our administrative manual that we are processing right now, to share that with other providers across the country and help more people with disabilities to be able to become savers and eventually enter IDAs and access all the other services that the previous speaker spoke about. So there's programs out there that you can enroll in. You can approach banks about supporting you. It's key to get your administration on board with the importance of financial literacy and to start a program within your agency. That kind of sums up. I think I made it within my time frame. Are there any questions?
Yes, thank you, Fran. There were a few questions. The first was, how soon will the SOS program be ready for replication?
Well, our goal is by the end of this year to have that done. So right now the curriculum is actually out in the copyright process, and we are finalizing a lot of the format, with the final format and our administrative manual. If anyone is interested, they can please, my email is on there, please send me an email. We will keep a listing of those who are interested, and as soon as the flyers, the brochures will be coming out actually pretty soon. As soon as those are finalized, we can start to send them out to people. So our goal is the end of this year, calendar year, and we hope to meet that.
The second question was, do funds for SOS affect SSI?
No, they don't. It's modeled after the federal IDA program, and because they're in escrow accounts and the funds are never returned to the individual, if someone saves for a vacation, the funds are payable to the travel agency. If somebody buys a TV, it's payable to Walmart or wherever. So because the funds never return to the individual, they are protected.
And how did you make that arrangement? Or how did you get to that point?
Well, with the support of the DD Council, it was written along the model of the IDA. Those are federal guidelines that that can be followed, and they are protected because they're in those protected accounts.
Great, thank you, Fran. Up next are Margaret Lom and Megan O'Neill. Margaret is an assistant professor at the Boston College Graduate School of Social Work. She is also a faculty associate at the Center for Social Development at Washington University, where she received her master's and doctoral degrees. Her area of expertise is in international social development, with an emphasis on social inclusion and exclusion and capacity building, including asset building. Megan is an asset building consultant and PhD student at the School of Community Economic Development of Southern New Hampshire University. She provides training and technical assistance to organizations to help ensure the economic empowerment of people with disabilities. She specializes in disability inclusion tactics, interaction of public benefits and building assets, and providing research materials on a wide variety of poverty reduction programs.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually looking for my slide.
Would you like us to run it, Margaret?
Yeah, I don't see my name on the, yeah, sure. That would be good. Thanks. I'm actually honored at the opportunity to share a few points on asset building. The modest objective of my discussion this afternoon is to give an overview of the asset-based perspective of welfare, as well as review research that has been undertaken within the context of ARD, and ARD, the American Dream demonstration. And this is the first and most comprehensive study of individual development account programs. I also review some research on asset building that has been done outside the context of ARD. And then I will turn the discussion over to Megan, who will review a policy aspect, as well as suggest some policy implications. Megan?
Yes.
I'm not able to see the screen, Hannah. Like it's not moving.
I don't think we're advancing. Yeah, there we are. There we are.
Oh, thank you. So like the first thing that I'd like to say in terms of giving an overview of the asset-based perspective of welfare is that this perspective, could you please move the slide? Thank you. Yeah, this perspective was benchmarked by Sheridan, who challenged the view that welfare should be assessed predominantly in terms of household incomes. It suggested instead that poverty and welfare should be viewed as a dynamic process, and hence the focus of welfare policy should be on factors that trigger spells of poverty and on those that cushion effects of such triggers. Sheridan then proposed asset ownership in the form of education, home ownership, and ownership of a small business as an intervention that might mediate the negative effects of deprivation and promote social development. In a way, the premises of the welfare perspective that I'm discussing here is conceptually easy to understand. It's essentially that having an asset would lead to positive effects beyond the effects of income and consumption. Like if you look at table 1, which is on the next slide, I'll just continue. I don't see table 1 up here. Yeah. To the left, you see the asset experience, and to the right, you see the welfare outcomes. And the asset experience has been grouped into 2 categories: the experience of accumulating an asset and the experience of possessing an asset. In terms of the welfare outcomes, what our research has shown us is that this can be grouped into 4 categories, including psychological, social, political or civic, and economic effects. Moving along, we note that when we try to understand these effects, it becomes a little bit complex and begs the question, why and how does asset ownership create the proposed effects? What does this mean for vulnerable individuals and households? Can they save enough to accumulate assets? In attempting to answer these and similar questions, Sheridan then proposed an intervention called Individual Development Account Programs, which we actually had been defined earlier. For this discussion, if we go to the next slide, I'll limit my discussion by underscoring 2 points. And the first point is that IDAs are a special saving account which operates on the principle of fairness and emphasizes the role of institutional factors in influencing behaviors and outcomes. In a sense, IDAs would give us a program bundle, including access, because the rules of an IDA program will actually define the access. And they also provide an incentive, which, as we heard before, is in the form of a match rate. And they also determine facilitation, the support given to program participants, as well as providing information on how to participate and the benefits that are associated with participation. Hence, we can look at an IDEA program as a threefold intervention in that it creates an opportunity for participating by making the saving process available for people with limited financial resources for whom historically this process has not been as readily available. IDEAs also enhance saving and asset accumulation through program structures that call attention to the benefits that are associated with savings. And in a sense, we can argue that participating in an IDEA program by itself may have positive outcomes in that it opens up a structure of possibilities for people with limited financial resources and allows them to engage with a mainstream financial institution. Hannah, can we go back just one slide? Because I want to draw attention to some of the empirical evidence that have emerged within the context of AD. And I just want to underscore that from 1998 through 2003, AD followed over 2,000 IDA program participants across 14 different states. And in fact, the fourth wave of AD has just been completed. So I'm giving examples of some of these studies and focusing specifically on the welfare effects accrued to IDA participation. The first study that I'm looking at was conducted by Sheridan and Associates. And these scholars indicated that the poor could serve in the context of an IDA program. And in fact, what they found was that low-income households saved more on average. In another study, Schreiner and Associates indicated that it were in fact the institutional characteristics of an IDA that were positively related to program outcomes. Going further, another study was conducted by McBride and Associates, and what they noted was that IDA participation was associated with a number of positive outcomes. And these include feeling confident about the future, feelings of economic security, and a sense of control over one's life. In another study that was conducted in the context of AD, Lombe and Sheridan found that participants reported positive outcomes in terms of asset ownership and social inclusion. What they noted specifically was that about 24% of the participants had owned a home within 5 years of contact with an IDA program. 10% had started a small business, and a significant number had started saving for education. And this could have been their own education or the education of their children. The respondents also reported feeling respected in their communities. As we move along, I would like to acknowledge that asset building programs targeting people with disabilities are fairly recent, but evidence is beginning to accumulate suggesting positive effects. As you can see on this slide, I'm going to review a number of studies. One of the studies has been conducted within the context of AD, and the other studies outside the context of AD. In a recent study that was conducted by Lombe and Associates, these investigators noted that participants with disabilities saved significantly less on average compared to participants without disabilities. And in fact, what we found was that these participants saved less by about $6. And this has implications for the match money that comes with IDA participation. These scholars also noted that only one institutional characteristic, which is asset-specific financial education, was significantly related to saving performance. The others were not. They also found that the demographic characteristics of the respondents, including age, education, race, and household income, were positively related to saving performance. Household size had a negative effect on saving performance, to the point that larger households saved less on average. In another study, which was conducted outside the context of AD, this study was actually based on the consumer-directed care program, and we focused specifically on cash and counseling. And the people that investigated the IDA, or rather program outcomes, found out that participant demographic characteristics, including employment, marital status, were related to program savings, and that two characteristics of the program, this is the cash and counseling program, were related to participants' savings. And these included the use of a consultant in negotiating facets of the program, and hiring a friend or a neighbor as the personal assistance provider. The final study that I'm going to review was conducted within the context of cash and counseling, specifically using a consumer-directed care program that worked with a credit union. And the scholars that did this study found that people with disabilities could serve within the context of a credit union for the purchase of services and assets with potential to enhance their independence and social functioning. They also noted that these people served for a considerably wide range of goods and services. And some of these goods and services included backup, respite, emergency services, computer or other technological services, home modifications, assistive devices, and exercise equipment. In this same study, the people who investigated the outcomes noted that, or rather their respondents reported barriers to using the services provided by the credit union. And some of these barriers included the lack of banking experience, the lack of knowledge on basic operations of a financial institution, general financial illiteracy, and they also reported distance from the banking center as a limitation, and this was due mainly to lack of transportation and limited access to technology or the internet. Before I turn the discussion over to Megan, I'd like to acknowledge some of the limitations that are inherent in ARD data. One of the limitations has to do with the fact that although the participants are 200% of the poverty line, this is not a typical welfare sample in that the respondents work almost full-time. I think 99% of them work full-time, and about 81% of them have a high school diploma. Another limitation has to do with sampling. We note that although this was a random sample, which was assigned to a control and experimental group, it was drawn from program-selected groups of individuals, and therefore these studies suffer from selection bias. There's also the issue of the research and its reliance on quantitative data, which were collected mainly through surveys, and the surveys are based on recall. This has potential to limit the study's ability to capture the lived experiences of the respondents. In closing, I'd like to leave you with a number of points. As we've noted earlier in this discussion, asset building initiatives are increasingly being seen as the primary means to promote inclusion. It's also likely that even under the current political administration, even given the economic downturn that are being experienced, the push towards asset ownership will continue, leaving individuals who are vulnerable further behind. Ideas and similar programs have great promise to promote savings and asset accumulation for people with limited financial resources. However, if we've learned anything from my research, there are a number of structural questions that need to be asked and probably examined seriously. One of these is, how can IDA programs be structured so that they don't only reach but are effective for people with disabilities? The second question is, what specific characteristics of an IDA program are useful in promoting saving and asset accumulation among people with disabilities? And the last question is, what are the barriers to participating in an IDA program for people with disabilities? And if these barriers can be identified, how can they be overcome? This is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. This is Megan O'Neill. I wanted to thank both Hannah and Margaret. Hannah's going to be running my slides, and I'll tell you when I'm ready to forward. So I also wanted to thank everyone that is still on the line with us. I know that this is a lot of very heady, complex information, and this has been a long webinar, so we are in our home stretch, and I am gladly appreciative of the ones that are still staying with us. So I used to work with Tom Foley at the World Institute on Disability, and I spent several years promoting a lot of the programs that you've heard about today and a lot of others that we didn't have time to cover. And I became incredibly frustrated with the reality of the world that we lived in that has so many barriers to these great programs, and the fact that people with disabilities could not participate in these programs for a variety of reasons. And these variety of reasons, as a questioner pointed out earlier, that these barriers are real, that policy barriers, programmatic barriers, psychosocial barriers, all are very real and exist in our world. While Tom did a beautiful job earlier of explaining how these programs can work and all the interactions together, there are so many complexities from program to program, state to state, even disability to disability, that we do know that these barriers exist, and breaking this down even in 2 hours is impossible to do. These barriers, as I indicate on this slide, are threefold as I see them. And this is why I decided that I could no longer work at WID and that I really needed to go back and pursue a PhD in order to attack those barriers. My PhD, which I'll talk briefly about my dissertation work, it's going to be addressing some of those policy barriers and the research lacks that we experience today. The policy barriers, as so many of the panelists have pointed out earlier, is that people just are restricted from saving, they're restricted from earnings, and this complicates even the lowest levels of employment. There's also programmatic barriers that Margaret raised as well. How we design certain programs, are they geared towards having people with disabilities? Are they geared towards inclusion? Or are the rules and regulations of barriers or of benefit programs so complicated that people are very reluctant to work with people with disabilities? And finally, one of the third barriers is that there are psychosocial barriers, stigma, discrimination, and even individuals' misconceptions about their own abilities to work, earn, and save. Let's move on to the second slide. This is all what prompted me to go back and get my PhD in community economic development. Despite the excellent work being done by Shawn, Johnette, Margaret, and many others that are not available to present today, there's so much that we don't know about people with disabilities and their financial situations. How does an individual live on SSI? Right now, the federal standard, I think, is $674 a month. How do people survive in the real world? What do they do to make this work? We simply don't know the answers to those questions. We do know from the asset building community and poverty reduction work, that's the research that's been ongoing, that some of which Margaret pointed out, we do know some things. We know that there are quite a few people living in poverty that do not have basic access to financial institutions, don't have basic bank accounts. And we also know that this has proved to be a significant impediment for people to build assets. I mean, it's awfully hard to buy your own home or start your own business if you don't have a basic banking account. And that in order to participate in even being promoted out of poverty, that not having one of these basic financial accounts, either at a credit union, a bank, any financial institution, makes economic self-sufficiency and building assets extremely, extremely difficult. And we also know from a lot of the poverty research that those that have accounts are more likely to not only own other assets, but to not be in poverty. Let's move on to the next slide. So we also know a little bit, not as much as we need to know in order to really make changes. That the barriers that I pointed out earlier, I feel like that one of the reasons that we have yet been all that successful on changing a lot of these restrictive policies, both on assets and earnings for people with disabilities, is that we don't have the ammunition. We don't have adequate research base in order to make a very good case to those in Congress, either at the state legislative level or the federal level, is that we don't have the ammunition that's required in order to really make a case that says, look, people with disabilities are living in severe amounts of poverty, and this has produced a lot of hardships. Shawn gave you some information, but as he pointed out, this is only relatively recent, and that we don't have enough specific information on this, how this directly affects people's lives. We do know a little bit, as I indicate on this slide and some of the work that I'm doing now, is that we do know that people with disabilities, especially those on SSI, often don't have bank accounts. We know that this is research based from Social Security, the Treasury Department. They've done a lot of work trying to get people onto direct deposit so that it will save them money and it'll be less complicated. We can reduce fraud and abuse. Very little work is done from the perspective of those recipients of what is it like, why don't they use bank accounts? So nobody's really asked the question why these benefit recipients, people on SSI, SSDI, are turning away from the financial mainstream. Why don't they have bank accounts? Is it because they don't have access, or is it for a larger reason that when you live on $674 a month, you simply can't afford an overdraft charge, you can't afford to have the minimum balances necessary to maintain a bank account? These are some questions that we've never asked recipients. We've asked that from a government level, but we've never asked it from the recipient's level of very practical reasons on why that these recipients are not participating in the financial mainstream. And this has proven to be a significant barrier on why people with disabilities are not participating in a lot of asset building programs. Let's move on to the next slide. I don't really have a whole lot of time to go into my dissertation, and it's still in the preliminary stages, but I did want to say a little bit that I was frustrated about the amount of barriers and the fact that I feel like sometimes we may have, in our effort to find an answer to the poverty and disability problem, we continue to construct pilot programs. And when I mean me, I mean mainly the government. Some of us in the nonprofit world, some people that on this call that I've worked with, have done excellent programs, including the one that Fran spoke about earlier. They're excellent programs, but they don't exist everywhere. There's been no systematic strategy in order to attack the poverty issue. And so this has been a continual problem, that what works in one area may not work in another area, that from state to state we have different benefit rules, and this has caused a major problem. And that's why I chose to go back and get my PhD and do this research, is that I really felt like that we may be skipping steps on the basics, that we need to go back and really look at where people with disabilities are at from a financial situation and explore how they're living and what they need to do to get out of poverty. That before they can even participate in IDA programs and other savings programs and filing taxes, what are the basics, even before that level, that when you're living in extreme poverty, how do you even start to get out? And that's why I decided to focus on what role does an account have for people with disabilities. And for those of you that have ever done a dissertation, you realize that you have to make a lot of choices and narrow it down a lot more narrowly than you would ever want to. So this program, or the dissertation research I'm doing, will focus on people with spinal cord injuries in Chicago, Illinois. So I know that this is not as widespread findings. I won't have as widespread findings as I'd like, but I do think that the goal here is to produce something that's replicable so that we can look into the situation for a large amount of people with various types of disabilities. All right, let's move on to the next slide. If any of you are interested, especially those of you that are working in Chicago or in Illinois, if you're interested in working or hearing more about my dissertation research, please contact me, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about it in much greater detail later. I did want to mention, and end this webinar on a more positive note. There are possibilities out there, and I wanted to talk about the ABLE accounts. ABLE accounts was a piece of legislation that is introduced in both the House and the Senate on February 26th of this year. The House version and the Senate version are identical. This ABLE Accounts Achieving a Better Life Experience Act of 2009 was introduced by Robert Casey and Crenshaw, Representative Crenshaw. There was a whole cadre of other people, but these were the primary authors. The purpose of these ABLE accounts are to assist families and individuals to save. And this is for supporting all kinds of maintaining health, quality of life. Independence is very key in this bill. It's not meant to supplant public benefits. It's actually meant to supplement them. If you would like, I think the best way to look at these accounts is a cross between something like an IRA or 529 and a special needs trust. Now, some of you may know what a special needs trust is. Some of you may not. I'll go into a little bit more detail about the specifics of what the differences between ABLE accounts would be and special needs trusts. But that's basically the idea, is that this is giving people a tax beneficial product that helps people with disabilities save and enhance the quality of life specifically. Let's move to the next slide. Go into a little bit more detail about ABLE accounts. Now, this has not passed. I want to very much stress the fact that this has just been introduced. It's currently in committee, and the only way to ever get it out, especially in the thorny Congress that we have right now that seems very much preoccupied with other very important issues, the only way to get this out of committee is if a whole lot of people express their support. And I will have information at the end of this presentation about how you can actually do that. There's an organization that's set up so that you can send information to your representatives and senators about that specifically. So let's get into a little bit of the details, and I won't touch on everything because it's very tax-oriented, and some of you may not be all that interested to get into that much detail. But what it essentially says is that there's one account that will be allowed for every, now I say SSI beneficiary. However, the way that it's actually, the legislation is currently written is that it says that anybody that is potentially eligible for SSI or SSDI, but is not getting SSI because of the assets or income restrictions. This means that the way that this legislation is written, it would mean that someone that is either newly acquired a disability or someone that has a disability would not be forced into poverty in order to qualify for SSI, that they could set up one of these ABLE accounts and invest some money and then possibly become eligible for SSI. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work that way a lot of the times now. A lot of times, in order for a person to become eligible for either SSI or Medicaid, they have to become impoverished in order to do that. Each beneficiary, each individual is allowed one account per lifetime that can be worth up to $500,000. So they can invest up to $500,000 in this account. It has a whole variety of allowable expenses that are listed on the slide. We can move to the next slide. The main important allowable fund that this makes this different from special needs trusts, which I'll talk about, is that ABLE accounts are allowed to pay for housing. As many of you that have worked with people with disabilities, you recognize that housing, especially in high-cost areas, is one of the main impediments to independence, that both rent and mortgage can be paid through an ABLE account. This does, contributions to these accounts can be made by anyone, including the beneficiary themselves. contributions up to $2,000 a year are tax deductible. This is like the 529 college savings account. This, however, is not refundable. So you wouldn't get a benefit back. I mean, if you filed your EITC or things like that, which is refundable, this is different, that it wouldn't be refundable, so you're not going to get paid, but you would have that as a deduction on your taxes. And anyone can do this. So if you essentially, if you have an ABLE account, which of course has to be set up by a qualified attorney that knows these rules, if it does happen to pass, these contributions of $2,000 can be made by anyone. That means that you essentially become kind of your own nonprofit. So your parents can contribute, other family members, you can have earned income, you could even actually contribute your SSI or even your SSDI in order to become eligible for SSI. It's very, very wide open. It's written in an incredibly beneficial way. You can't have, however, an account after you turn 65, so it's for anyone under 65. The beneficiary, which means the person that actually runs the account, that makes disbursements, can be the trustee. That means that the beneficiary can control their own money. Other family members can be trustees, financial institutions, anyone other third-party, qualified third parties, which also includes pooled trust funds. How they're similar to special needs trust, those of you that know something about special needs trust, it's like this. It's a trust fund that's set up by an attorney for an individual with a disability so that a person can maintain eligibility for benefits but also have these accounts for those supplementary needs. The difference between an ABLE account and a special needs trust fund is that, one, the beneficiary can be the trustee, and they have control over their own money. They can also contribute their own money. This is very much unlike a special needs trust. Special needs trusts are incredibly paternalistic in that they see the individual with a disability is unable to handle their own money, so therefore they must have a qualified external party to handle their money for them. ABLE accounts are a little bit more empowering in that they allow individuals a lot of freedom. They can still maintain eligibility for a lot of crucial benefits, but at the same time, they have the independence to use those for a lot wider allowable disbursement needs. Go to the next slide. This is how you can get involved in ABLE accounts. ABLE accounts have not, of course, been passed. They are now in committee in both the Senate and House. For full text of the bill, you can go to thomas.gov and you can look it up through ABLE Act of 2000. And you can also take action. This is something I highly encourage people to get involved with. Autism Votes set up their own little website where you can send a letter to your senator or representative and encourage them to get the ABLE Act of 2009 out of committee. And quite honestly, if people don't do that, I don't think that this will, at least not in this session of Congress, ever become enacted. And if any questions, I would be happy to open it up. I think we have plenty of time for some more questions. So.
Thank you, Megan. There are a lot of questions, actually. First one, for Margaret. In the study showing that people with disabilities save less, did they compare average income of people with and without disabilities?
Yeah, because I think the income range was about the same. Yeah. And the only thing that we thought was different, like from the analysis that we conducted, was only the disability status versus non-disability status.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Tom. Tom, the amount of SSI you cited, $900, is not possible except in California. And the current SSI federal benefit rate is $674 a month, which is more common. Were you referring to the SSI plus the California state supplement?
You know, I was, and to be honest, it's not always that much in California either, but 900 is a nice round number, which makes doing the math a lot easier for me. So, you know, the rules around SSI and the interaction with a federally funded IDA and a PASS are the same, but I just picked that number to make the math easier, but it is fairly reflective of the California number.
Great. Another question for you, Tom, is can you discuss how long people can use a PASS account versus saving in an IDA versus using IRWES, BWES? Since all of these have different time limits, income, and asset exceptions, how do these relate to the calculations you showed?
You know, it can really vary. For example, we are aware of people who have used PASS plans, for example, while they were in law school. So that has been anywhere from 3 to 4 to 5 years. You know, it depends on the vocational or the occupational goal. And the other thing about a PASS plan is you need Social Security to sign off on it. But we've seen PASS plans, you know, anywhere from a year to, you know, 4 or 5 years. So it depends on the vocational and goal. With an IDA, you know, that will largely be dependent on, again, the goal, how much money the IDA allows somebody to accumulate, as well as what somebody can participate per month. So that can be anywhere from a year on up as well. And as far, I think the last question was IRWES, that's employment-related work expenses. As long as somebody's on SSI and working and has employment-related work expenses, that is, well, basically deductible from the earned income calculation for SSI.
Great. This is a question for all of our panelists. Many of you have focused on IDAs, yet many rural areas are not served by local IDA programs. Are there federal IDAs that can be used?
This is Tom. You know, a lot of the federal IDAs are run by, you know, nonprofits in the community, and there's a geographic requirement for the IDA. I don't have it in front of me, but I know there are some efforts being made to assist folks with disabilities from a national perspective around IDAs. I don't have that in front of me, but if somebody wants to shoot me an email on that, I can look that up and respond to them more one-on-one.
Yeah, this is Megan. I would also like, because I think I interpreted the question a little differently than Tom did. I interpreted it, the questioner was asking, are there federal programs out there for everyone? The way that IDAs work are not typically the way that a lot of other disability programs work. It's a partnership between a nonprofit and sometimes funding through the federal government, but the individual organization operates the IDA, so it's not always that, and those are, like Tom said, restricted a lot of times to geographic areas. So it's not exactly, IDAs don't operate like, okay, there's a federal program that you can go out there to, say, your vocational rehab or your Social Security office or whatever, and access the program. It's up to the organization themselves to apply for IDA funds or start their own IDA program. So definitely not universal around the country.
This is Johnette, and I think also the Office of Community Service, which is in the Health and Human Services, you can go online, Office of Community Service, and they are the ones that actually oversee the IDA program, and there's information on their website. Also, CFED.org I think they have www.cfed.org. I think there's a reference there to where to go for the IDA information and where they're located. And Megan's absolutely right. They're not a national program that can be drawn from. Has to be in a very specific area, like we just heard in New Jersey or in a city.
Great. Another question was, can a guardian, parent, or other person set up an IDA?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that a person has to be working and have earned income to participate in the program. So let's say it's a person who has a significant disability, and let's say they have an income of $4,000 or $5,000 a year. They can, and they're working. Let's say they're working 2 hours, 1 hour a week or 2 hours a week. I think they're eligible to participate, and I don't know that, but that's a very easy question to find out.
And
this is Megan. Here, let me just add a little bit to that. I do know that a parent can save for their child's education. That is, in federal programs, they can save for their own child's education. Whether or not they can buy a house is probably more dependent on the program itself.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Megan, because I know, from my knowledge, a parent can save for education for themselves or for a child, but buying an asset might be problematic.
However, it's always a good idea to ask the individual program on the rules that that program has. Sometimes they differ from program to program.
Thank you, Megan. Another question for you was, are ABLE accounts set up through banks or attorneys?
They're attorneys. That's the one thing that I didn't mention as what I see as a drawback of the ABLE Act. It doesn't change it from the way that special needs trusts are operated. You would have to go through a lawyer in order to write your account act and establish the rules and parameters around that. So I really don't think that would be something that a bank would or could do. It's also not exactly, it doesn't get around the basic problem of special needs trusts in that setting them up, unless you have a friend that's an attorney that can do it for you and is willing to do it for nothing, for free, it doesn't get around the fact that it's still a difficult thing for a low-income person that may not have family resources to set up the account. That's a basic flaw, in my opinion, of the ABLE Act, is that really you have to have a little bit of money in order to set one up.
Unfortunately, I think we are running a little short on time, but I will ask one last question and then we'll wrap it up. This is for all of our panelists, how do these programs impact access to SSI or SSDI and Medicaid eligibility?
Well, this is Johnette, and I think, as I mentioned when I spoke, the EITC, there is no, SSDI is not a means-tested program, so there is no eligibility requirement unless you're on SSI and and low income, and then you also get SSDI. But EITC actually receipted that if you have $2,000 in your bank account and you receive a return for $500 and it puts you at $2,500, that does not count as income or resource for, I think it's 9 months. And I think, as you heard from Megan and others that spoke, that the IDAs, if they are in a federal IDA program, they're in an account. I think you can have them in that account for 5 years. and it does not count as income or resource because, again, and you heard that from our colleague in New Jersey, it's not touchable. It's an asset that's there that'll help after somebody saves to reach their goal. And I think that the I think that's, I'll turn it over to anybody else that wants to comment on it.
This is Tom. I think Megan made a really good point earlier that, for example, the federally funded IDA has the income and the asset disregard. But it's crucial to make sure that you understand the rules and that you're in a federally funded IDA. Similarly, with regard to Medicaid, states differ dramatically in what someone can do from an asset building perspective based on the state rules. And again, it's up to the individual to really make sure that they're following the rules precisely. It differs from state to state. It differs from program to program. There's a lot of opportunity out there for folks with disabilities to build assets, but at the same time, the caveat is it has to be done properly.
Right.
Like any long-term financial planning, the devil's in the details, and that doesn't change for people with disabilities.
Right. This is Johnette again. In New Hampshire, we had done a mini longitudinal study. We're doing a longer one right now in Wisconsin and New Hampshire, but we followed 50 people. This is Southern New Hampshire School of Community Economic Development, Toby Davies' work through a NIDA grant that we have, and we followed 50 people with significant disabilities who were working and gave them 5 different treatments like financial education, credit debt counseling, benefits counseling, and at the end of 18 months we found that those that were actually had credit counseling at least 3 times had a 12% significant 12% increase in their savings. And I think what we're hearing today, we have very little longitudinal data on savings and outcomes of low-income people. Forget disability. We just don't have that because I think historically we don't really fund that kind of poverty research because in our world today we're really interested in the market segment. And that's another audio conference call because there's another side to this story which we didn't talk about today. There's about $1 trillion in aggregated income, about $250 billion in disposable income by people with disabilities. They're a very loyal market segment. However, that's not the conversation we're having today. So it's a very delicate conversation in a way because we just need to be able to look at all the different aspects of this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I want to call your attention to asset building coalitions in states. Over half the states, 26, have an asset building coalition. An asset building coalition is typically a diverse coalition invested in building the financial stability and strength of communities in their state through increased asset ownership and asset protection. To find out whether your state has a coalition or for more information, go to our resource page for this webinar or www.assetcoalitiontoolkit.org. We will also email everyone a link to the resource page at the end of the webinar. If you want to see how your state ranks on asset building areas, visit CFPB's 2009-2010 Assets and Opportunities Scorecard website. This link is on our resource page. Thank you to all the presenters who are diligently working to provide asset-building opportunities to individuals with disabilities and gave of their time today to share this information. Thank you to all the attendees for your participation in this webinar. Please take a minute to fill out our survey. If you would like more information about asset building for individuals with disabilities, or if you would like to subscribe to ACTS or the Clearinghouse Review, you can do so through this survey. Again, if you have any questions or would like further information, please visit our resource page or feel free to contact me at hannahwd@povertylaw.org. Thank you.